The coffee mug shattered against the break room floor, spraying hot liquid across the tile. Landry had Piper backed against the counter, his arm blocking her escape route, body leaning uncomfortably close to her trembling form. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on me with a desperate plea I'd seen too many times on too many faces. "Need something?" Landry asked without turning, his voice dripping with irritation at the interruption. I placed myself between them, forcing him back a step. "Actually, yes. I need you to stop cornering women in this office." Thessalon's felt electric. Piper seized her chance to slip away, clutching her folder against her chest like a shield. "Excuse me." Landry's signature smirk appeared, the one that said he knew exactly what game he was playing. I stepped closer. "You heard me. I need you to stop trapping women in corners. Stop whispering things that make their skin crawl. Stop touching them when they've made it clear they don't want it." His eyes narrowed, that smirk momentarily faltering. "Who exactly do you think you're talking to?" "I know exactly who I'm talking to," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The question is, do you know who you're talking to?" Landry glanced around the break room, reassuring himself no one else was watching. "Look, Sybil, I don't know what your problem is." "Barcelona," I said quietly, maintaining eye contact. The color drained from his face. "I know about Barcelona," I continued. "About what happened on the hotel balcony with Mina? About the elevator incident with Jeanette? About how you followed Cristato her room?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "You're bluffing. The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. I've requested to speak. Want to walk there together?" He bolted from the room. "Before I continue this story, I want Tosk. Have you ever witnessed someone getting away with terrible behavior just because they had connections? It happens more often than we think. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button. Leave a comment below with your thoughts and subscribe to hear more stories that need to be told. Now back to what happened next. My name is Sibyllaria. I'm not someone who stands out in a crowd. Average height, brown hair, usually pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and the kind of face people sometimes think they've met before, but can't remember where. This invisibility had become my greatest asset. I worked as a compliance analyst, a job title most people's eyes glaze over when I mention it. My role involved reviewing internal processes, looking for inconsistencies, gathering data, and identifying patterns. I was good at my job precisely because I noticed things others didn't. 8 months ago, I joined the company fresh from a similar position at a smaller firm. During my first week, I watched Landry isolate Daphne, a marketing coordinator, in the copy room. His body language, the way he leaned in, the unmistakable discomfort in her posture, it triggered alarm bells. "Don't," my manager Whitney whispered when she caught me watching. We were sharing lunch in the courtyard. "He's the VP's nephew. Untouchable for your own career? Stay quiet." Whitney's warning wasn't unique. Over the next few weeks, I heard variations of the same advice from long-term employees. That's just how things are. Nothing can be done. Best to keep your head down. What these well-meaning colleagues didn't realize was that keeping my head down wasn't in my nature. Not anymore. 3 years earlier at my previous job, I'd experienced similar behavior from a senior executive. I'd reported it through proper channels, trusted the system, and ended up being the one pushed out while he received a promotion. The betrayal taught me that official processes often protect predators, not victims. So I began watching Landry with methodical attention. His pattern emerged clearly. He calculated the timing of his advances, always ensuring they were just private enough to avoid witnesses, but not so isolated as to seem deliberate. He chose vulnerable targets, new hires without established workplace allies, contract workers afraid for their job security, single mothers who couldn't risk unemployment. Most revealing was how he leveraged the company's unspoken politics. His uncle Harmon, the vice president of operations, had built a protective fortress around his nephew through strategic hiring and promotions of loyalists. HR complaints mysteriously disappeared. Women requesting transfers were labeled difficult. Those who pushed too hard often found themselves with negative performance reviews. I made myself invisible, blending into the background of meetings, lingering in hallways, becoming the forgettable face people spoke freely around. I built relationships with administrative assistants, maintenance staff, and security personnel. The eyes and ears of any organization who see everything while remaining unseen themselves. The company retreat to Barcelona 4 months ago provided my first real opening. 3 women had separate incidents with Landry during that trip. What he didn't know was that I spoke fluent Spanish, having lived in Madrid for 5 years as a teenager. I befriended the hotel staff who had witnessed his behavior, who shared details about how they'd been called to handle situations involving the American executive. I also began connecting with former employees who'd left because of Landry. Coffee meetings, lunch conversations, building a network of women with similar experiences, not for gossip, but for truth, for pattern recognition. For months, I gathered information methodically. I wasn't building a legal case. I'd learned the hard way those could be dismantled. I was assembling something more powerful, a collective truth too consistent to dismiss. Then Piper arrived. 22 years old, first corporate job, supporting her younger siblings while their mother battled cancer. I recognized Landry's predatory interest immediately during her introduction meeting when her hands trembled as she spoke. The way Helen lingered after, offering to show her around, his eyes tracking her movements in the hallways. I'd warned her subtly as I had others, but Piper's vulnerability made her an ideal target. When I walked into the break room and saw her trapped against the counter, something inside me finally snapped. After Landry fled the break room, I helped Piper collect herself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Nobody's ever. They all just look away." "Not anymore," I promised, squeezing her hand. I returned to my desk, heart pounding. I'd accelerated my timeline, forced my hand. The company network pinged with a notification. Emergency board meeting at 2 p.m. I hadn't actually requested to speak. That had been a bluff. But Landry clearly believed me capable of it. My phone buzzed with text messages from Whitney. "What did you do?" Followed by Harmon is furious. Then Landry saying you threatened him. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent out the message I'd prepared months ago. Ready for this exact moment. A group text to 17 current and former employees who had shared their experiences with me. "It's happening today, 200 p.m. boardroom." By 1:30, my office phone rang. The board assistant's voice was clipped. "Miss Arya, your presence is requested in the board meeting." "I'll be there," I replied calmly. I spent the next 20 minutes reviewing my notes, not for preparation, but for reassurance. Then I locked my computer, straightened my blazer, and headed to the elevator. The boardroom occupied the top floor with windows overlooking the city. 12 people sat around the massive table, their faces arranged in various expressions of concern and annoyance. Harmon sat at the head, his resemblance to Landry unmistakable in their shared jawline and cold eyes. "Miss Arya," he began as I took the sole empty chair. "My nephew claims you've created a hostile work environment, that you're spreading malicious rumors and making threats." My heart sank even as I'd anticipated this exact scenario. I'd risked everything and now faced termination, possibly worse if they decided to pursue legal action for defamation. Harmon continued. "Such behavior violates numerous company policies." "Before you continue," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt, "you should know I'm not alone in this." Confusion flickered across Harmon's face. Before he could respond, the boardroom door opened. Deborah, the chief financial officer, the only woman in senior leadership, entered first, followed by Whitney. Behind them came Piper, still visibly shaken but standing tall. Then more faces appeared. Jeanette from accounting, Mina from graphic design, Krista from client relations, 5 current employees standing together in silent solidarity. Behind them came even more women I'd connected with over the past months. Former employees who had coordinated their schedules and traveled from as far as 3 hours away to attend. Then came 2 women clients who had experienced Landry's behavior during business dinners. The board members' expressions transformed from annoyance to shock as more and more women filed in, lining the walls of the room. "What is the meaning of this?" Harmon demanded, half rising from his chair. I stood to face him. "You wanted to discuss hostile work environments. We all have stories, and we're all prepared to tell them here today or publicly if necessary." The atmosphere in the boardroom shifted instantly. Harmon's expression hardened. But Deborah, the CFO, who had remained largely silent in previous meetings, spoke up. "Perhaps we should listen before deciding anything," she said, her calm voice carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of authority. "This is highly irregular," protested Thurston, the general counsel, his fingers nervously adjusting his tie. "We can't just have random employees bursting into a board meeting making accusations without what?" Deborah interrupted. "Without enough women to fill this entire room, without potential legal liability that could sink this company's reputation permanently, without clear violation of every ethics policy we claim to uphold?" A tense silence followed. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. "I move that we hear what these women have to say," said Bennett, the oldest board member, his weathered face grave. If there's truth here, we need to address it now. For the next hour, woman after woman spoke. No dramatic evidence, no secret recordings, just raw, painful truths that painted an undeniable pattern. Mina described the Barcelona incident, how Landry had cornered her on the hotel balcony during the company retreat. He told me my promotion was being considered and that he had significant influence with his uncle. Then he put his hand on my lower back and said he had a nice view from his room he wanted to show me. Jeanette spoke next. In the elevator, he pressed against me when we were alone. When I objected, he laughed and said I should learn to take a compliment. The next day, I found my project reassigned. Former employees shared similar stories spanning 3 years. A pattern emerged of isolation, proposition, and retaliation. Women who rejected him found themselves with poor performance reviews, lost opportunities, or suddenly not fitting company culture. Throughout the testimonies, I watched the board members' faces transform. Some showed shock, others displayed growing anger. A few, including Harmon, maintained carefully neutral expressions that betrayed nothing. Harmon tried interjecting several times. "These are serious allegations without I wasn't finished," said Krista, cutting him off with surprising force for someone who normally spoke so softly. After Barcelona, I reported the incident to HR. 2 weeks later, I was put on a performance improvement plan for communication issues. The HR report mysteriously missing from the system. Whitney stepped forward then. As a manager, her testimony carried particular weight. I've witnessed Landry's behavior for years. I'm ashamed to admit I advised women to keep quiet for their own protection. I was complicit in this culture of silence, and I'm here today because I refuse to be part of it anymore. Piper spoke last, her voice trembling but determined. I've only been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks and already I've been cornered twice. Today wasn't even the first time. I need this job to support my family while my mom fights cancer. He knew that. He mentioned it specifically when he said, "I hope nothing jeopardizes your position here." The room fell silent when she finished. 17 women, 17 stories, all pointing to the same conclusion. Thurston cleared his throat. While these accounts are concerning, they remain allegations without, if you say, without evidence one more time, I interjected. I'll have to wonder why you're so invested in dismissing consistent testimonies from nearly 20 women. Dee nodded. The pattern here is unmistakable, and patterns are evidence. Harmon finally spoke. His voice carefully controlled. These are serious claims requiring proper investigation. We'll need to convene HR and legal teams to review. No, I said simply. All eyes turned to me. No more internal investigations that disappear. No more HR reports that vanish. No more women pushed out while Landry remains protected. I placed a folder on the table. This contains the names and contact information of every woman in this room, plus 12 others who couldn't be here today. We're prepared to take this public. All of us, if appropriate action isn't taken immediately. You're threatening the company. Harmon's voice rose sharply. I'm promising transparency. I corrected something this company claims to value in every mission statement and annual report. Bennett leaned forward. What exactly are you asking for? Immediate suspension of Landry pending a third-party investigation, policy changes to protect employees from retaliation, and a commitment to take every harassment claim seriously, regardless of who it involves. I paused. We've prepared a detailed proposal. This feels like extortion, Harmon said, his face flushed. It's accountability, Deborah countered. She turned to the other board members. I move that we immediately suspend Landry Mitchell pending investigation, and that we hire an independent firm to conduct said investigation. I further move that we establish a committee to review and strengthen our harassment policies. I second, said Bennett immediately. This requires further discussion, Harmon protested. Then let's discuss, Deborah replied coolly. Shall we start with potential legal liability? Or perhaps the PR nightmare if 30 women go public with consistent harassment claims? Or maybe we should discuss the fiduciary responsibility this board has to protect the company from precisely this sort of exposure. The vote was taken 9-3 in favor of Deborah's motion. Harmon and 2 of his closest allies were the only opposition. Miss Aria, Deborah said as the meeting concluded, please have your group submit your policy recommendations by the end of the week. I'll be heading the committee personally. As we filed out of the boardroom, Whitney caught my arm. How did you do this? How did you get all these women to speak up? I listened. I replied simply, and I believed them. The next 3 days passed in a blur of meetings, statements, and tension. Landry was noticeably absent, having been escorted from the building immediately after the board vote. Harmon remained in his office, door closed, emerging only for essential meetings. On Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking garage level 3. Now I hesitated, showing the message to Whitney. Don't go alone, she advised, concern etched on her face. I won't, I promised, texting Deborah and security simultaneously. The parking garage was dimly lit, as always. I stepped off the elevator onto level 3. Deborah and a security officer flanking me. Landry stood beside his luxury car, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled, eyes bloodshot. You've ruined everything, he said when he saw me, voice slurring slightly. Happy now? My uncle can't protect me anymore. You ruined yourself? I replied calmly. I just made sure people knew the truth. He laughed bitterly. Truth? You don't know anything about me. I know enough. He took a step toward me, but the security officer moved forward. Landry stopped, swaying slightly. The investigation starts tomorrow, Deborah said coldly. I suggest you cooperate fully. And I strongly advise you to leave the premises immediately. Your access has been revoked. Landry's eyes narrowed. This isn't over. Actually, it is, I replied. The next morning, I arrived at work to find people gathered around monitors whispering. Piper rushed up to me. Have you seen? It's everywhere. On the screens were news reports. Tech executive dismissed following harassment allegations. Landry's face appeared next to corporate statements about zero tolerance and thorough investigations. More shocking was the second headline. VP of Operations resigns amid nephew's harassment scandal. Harmon had resigned that morning, effective immediately. His departure statement mentioned taking responsibility for oversight failures and personal reasons. Whitney appeared beside me. Did you know this would happen? I shook my head. I expected resistance, stonewalling, not this. Something doesn't add up, Whitney murmured. Harmon wouldn't just step down. She was right. The sudden resignation felt wrong, too easy, too clean. Harmon had built his career on never admitting defeat. This capitulation was out of character. Later that day, Deborah called me into her office. The third-party investigators start tomorrow, she said without preamble. But there's something you should know. She slid a tablet across her desk. On it was an internal email from Harmon to the board sent minutes before his resignation. The language was formal. The tone resigned, but one line stood out. In light of information Miss Arya apparently possesses regarding Barcelona, I believe my continued leadership would only further damage the company. I stared at the words, confused. I never said I had information about Harmon and Barcelona, only about Landry. Deborah's expression was unreadable, interesting, yet Harmon clearly believes otherwise. A chill ran down my spine. What had happened in Barcelona that Harmon thought I knew about? What connection did it have to Landry's behavior? The investigation just got more complicated, Deborah said. Whatever happened there? Harmon was willing to resign rather than have it exposed. I left her office with more questions than answers. In the hallway, my phone buzzed with a notification from a secured messaging app I'd installed months ago. The sender was one of the hotel staff from Barcelona I'd befriended. The message was brief. You should see this. Deleted from our security archives yesterday, but I made a copy. Attached was a video file. My hands trembled as I found an empty conference room to watch it. The timestamp showed 2:14 a.m. during the company retreat. The footage showed a hotel corridor. Landry appeared supporting a clearly intoxicated woman. Not an employee, but someone I recognized as the wife of a major client. Moments later, Harmon appeared from another direction, looking agitated. Words were exchanged. No audio, but the body language showed clear tension. Then Harmon grabbed the woman's other arm. Together, uncle and nephew half carried, half dragged her toward an elevator. The video ended there. I sat frozen, my mind racing. This wasn't just about Landry. This was about Harmon too, and possibly others. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Whitney. Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning. Something big is happening. The next day dawned with a sense of foreboding. Whatever came next would change everything, not just for me, but for every woman who had stepped forward for the company itself. As I dressed for work, I received another text. This one from a number I didn't recognize. Be careful what you wish for. Not all monsters die when exposed to light. Some just change their hunting grounds. I stared at the message for a long moment. A knot forming in my stomach. Someone was trying to intimidate me. Someone who knew what was happening. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Deborah before heading to work. The office atmosphere had transformed overnight. Groups of employees whispered in corners, conversations abruptly ending when others approached. Nobody knew exactly what was happening, but everyone sensed the ground shifting beneath their feet. Whitney intercepted me at the elevator. The boardroom is packed. Legal team, outside counsel, executives I've never even seen before. Any sign of Landry or Harmon? No, but rumor has it, Landry hired one of those crisis management firms, the kind celebrities use after scandals. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. By 8:30, I was in Deborah's office along with the company's head of security, a stoic woman named Ariel. The video you received is concerning, Deborah said without preamble. Ariel has been investigating separately since yesterday. Ariel nodded. The woman in the video is Ivy Lambert, spouse of Gregory Lambert from Lambert Solutions. They're one of our biggest clients. Is she okay? I asked. That's where it gets complicated. Ariel replied, I contacted Mrs. Lambert. Initially, she denied anything happened in Barcelona. When I mentioned the video's existence, she became extremely distressed and hung up. Deborah interjected. An hour later, Gregory Lambert called, demanding to know why we were harassing his wife about ancient history. He threatened to pull their business. But the retreat was only 4 months ago, I pointed out. Exactly, Ariel said grimly. When I tried following up with hotel staff, they suddenly claimed no knowledge of any incidents. Someone got to them. That's not all, Deborah added. The bank called this morning. Someone attempted to access confidential company financial records using my credentials. My mind raced. They're trying to cover their tracks. This goes beyond harassment. The question is how far beyond? Deborah said, checking her watch. It's time. The boardroom was indeed packed. The entire board was present along with the executive team, legal representatives, and several faces I didn't recognize. Notably absent were Landry and Harmon. Bennett called the meeting to order. As you're aware, serious allegations have emerged regarding Landry Mitchell's conduct. The third-party investigation begins today. However, new information has come to light that expands the scope considerably. Thurston, the general counsel, looked distinctly uncomfortable. Before we proceed, I must advise that what follows involves sensitive matters potentially extending beyond workplace harassment into other areas. Bennett nodded to Deborah, who stood. Yesterday, Miss Aria received footage from the Barcelona hotel showing Landry Mitchell and Harmon Wade escorting an intoxicated female client to an elevator at 2:14 a.m. When contacted, the woman denied any recollection of events, but became distressed when informed of the video. Murmurs rippled through the room. Subsequently, Deborah continued, attempts were made to access our financial records, particularly those relating to the Barcelona retreat and client entertainment expenses. Thurston cleared his throat. While disturbing, none of this constitutes proof of I wasn't finished, Deborah said sharply. This morning, I received this from an anonymous source. She tapped her tablet and the screen behind her lit up with financial records. Accompany credit card statements showing unusual charges during multiple client events and business trips over the past 3 years. Barcelona was just the most recent. These expenses were coded as client entertainment, but lack proper documentation. All were approved by Harmon Wade, all involved events, where Landry Mitchell was present and all coincide with dates, where female clients or their spouses later reported feeling unwell or having memory issues the following day. The room fell utterly silent. Bennett broke the silence. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. Deborah replied carefully. I am presenting financial irregularities that warrant investigation alongside the harassment claims. This is absurd, said Palmer, one of Harmon's allies on the board. You're trying to turn workplace harassment allegations into some sort of criminal conspiracy. I don't believe Miss Deborah is making accusations, I interjected, standing. She's presenting patterns, and as she pointed out yesterday, patterns are evidence. The meeting dissolved into heated discussion. Legal advised caution. Some board members wanted to contain the situation. Others insisted on full transparency. Through it all, I watched the faces, noting who seemed genuinely shocked versus those who appeared merely concerned about damage control. After nearly 2 hours, Bennett called for order. We have no choice but to expand the investigation to include these financial irregularities and their potential connection to the harassment claims. If crimes were committed, we have a legal obligation to report them. And in the meantime, Palmer demanded, in the meantime, we cooperate fully with investigators, secure all relevant records, and ensure the safety of everyone involved. Bennett replied firmly. As the meeting concluded, Deborah pulled me aside. Be careful. This just got much bigger than workplace harassment. I know, I said quietly. Landry was scheduled for his investigative interview this afternoon. His lawyer just called to cancel. He's running, I said. Maybe, Deborah replied. Or maybe he's regrouping. Over the next 2 days, the investigation expanded rapidly. The outside firm brought in additional specialists. More women came forward, not just employees, but clients and vendors who had interacted with Landry and, in some cases, Harmon. The pattern became clearer and more disturbing. The harassment wasn't random. It was systematic. The worst incidents occurred at client events where alcohol flowed freely, and certain women, usually those with some connection to valuable accounts or partnerships, found themselves unusually affected by seemingly modest amounts of alcohol. I was working late Thursday evening, reviewing documents the investigators had requested when Whitney burst into my office, pale-faced. Landry's back. He just walked into the building with 2 men I've never seen before. They went straight to the executive floor. My phone buzzed with a text from Deborah. My office now. I found Deborah standing at her window staring out at the city lights. Landry demanded an emergency meeting with the executive team. Claims she has information that will change everything. What kind of information? He wouldn't say, just that it involves you. She turned to face me. Is there anything I should know? I shook my head. I've been completely transparent with you and the investigators. Good, she said, because they're here. Landry entered, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. His appearance had transformed immaculate again, confident with a smile that chilled me. Miss Arya, he said smoothly, still leading your little crusade. I didn't respond. You know, he continued, setting a folder on Deborah's desk. When someone comes after me, I get curious about them, about their past, about what might motivate such vindictiveness. He gestured to one of his companions, who opened the folder. Miss Sybil Arya, except that wasn't always your name, was it? 3 years ago, you were Sybil Markham at Vertex Industries. My heart stopped. No one here knew about that time in my life. You filed harassment claims against a senior executive. Claims that were investigated and found to be, he paused dramatically, without merit. That's not what happened, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. The official record says otherwise, Landry continued. It says you fabricated claims after being passed over for promotion. It says you were let go for creating a hostile work environment. Ironic, isn't it? It says you tried to extort a settlement before leaving. That's a lie, I said, feeling my careful composure beginning to crack. They covered it up, just like you and your uncle have been doing. Landry smiled. The difference is we have documentation, official findings, court records from when your lawsuit was dismissed. What do you have? Stories, coincidences? A grainy video showing my uncle and me helping an intoxicated woman to her room. Deborah studied me carefully. Is this true? You filed previous harassment claims that were dismissed. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. The exact scenario I'd feared was unfolding. My credibility under attack. My past weaponized against me. Yes, I filed a claim. I admitted. And yes, it was dismissed because the executive I reported was the CEO's son, because HR buried it, because witnesses suddenly couldn't recall what they'd told me in confidence. Just like what's been happening here, Landry smirked. Or perhaps because you have a pattern of making false accusations. That's enough, Deborah said sharply. Whatever Miss Arya's past, we have testimony from nearly 20 women about your behavior, Landry. That stands on its own, does it? One of Landry's companions spoke up. Because 4 of those women have already contacted us to recant their statements. Seems they were pressured by Miss Arya to exaggerate incidents. We have signed affidavit. My blood ran cold. That's not possible. Jeanette, Krista, Daphne, and Lisa, the man read from his notes. I'll now say they felt coerced by you to paint normal workplace interactions as harassment. They're lying, I said, Evan's doubt crept in. Had they been threatened? Bribed? Talk to the others. We intend to, Landry said smoothly. But the pattern is already emerging. You orchestrated this witch hunt based on your own past grievances. Deborah remained impassive. We'll need to see those affidavit and verify them independently. Of course, Landry replied. In the meantime, we believe Miss Arya should be suspended pending investigation of her manipulation of company processes and coercion of colleagues. The room spun around me. Everything I'd worked for was unraveling, just like before. History repeating itself with merciless precision. This meeting is over, Deborah said. Leave the documents, we'll review them and respond appropriately. After they left, I sank into a chair, my hands shaking. They're trying to discredit me to save themselves. I know, Deborah said quietly. And it might work. 4 women recanting. They must have been threatened or paid off. Probably, Deborah agreed. But proving that is another matter. This is exactly how these situations typically play out. Attack the whistleblower. Divide the victims. Create enough doubt to escape consequences. She paused. Unless what? A gleam appeared in Deborah's eyes. Unless the whistleblower anticipated exactly this response. Did you? For the first time since Landry entered the room, I felt a flutter of hope. Actually, yes, I did. The next morning at 8 a.m., the board reconvened. Landry sat confidently at the table, his crisis team beside him. Harmon had returned as well. Though he was no longer acting as board chair, that position now belonged to Bennett. This emergency session is called to address new developments in the Mitchell investigation. Bennett began. Mr. Mitchell has presented evidence suggesting Miss Area manipulated the process and coerced testimony. Landry nodded smugly. Sadly, this appears to be a pattern with Miss Arriero, a vendetta carried over from her previous employment. Miss Area, Bennett turned to me. Do you wish to respond to these allegations? Yes, I said, standing. I do. I took a breath, looking around the room at the board members, at Landry's smug expression, at Harmon's tense posture. When you've been silenced before, I began. You learn to prepare differently the next time. At Vertex Industries, I trusted the system. I reported through proper channels. I believed truth would prevail. I was wrong. I moved to stand at the center of the room where everyone could see me clearly. So yes, I have a past, one where I witnessed harassment, reported it correctly, and was systematically discredited and pushed out. Not because my claims weren't true, but because the truth threatened powerful people. Landry leaned toward his crisis manager, whispering something with a self-satisfied smile. When I joined this company and saw the same patterns emerging with Landry, I knew reporting through normal channels wouldn't work. The system was designed to protect him, so I approached things differently. I nodded to Deborah, who distributed folders to each board member. What you're receiving is a detailed timeline, every interaction I've had with the women who came forward, every conversation, every meeting, all meticulously documented from day one. Landry's smile faltered slightly. You'll notice each interaction had at least one witness, someone else who was present or aware of the conversation. You'll find contact information for each witness. You'll also find that I never once suggested to any woman what to say or how to characterize her experiences. I simply asked, would you be willing to share what happened? I turned directly to Landry. You claim 4 women have recanted that they felt coerced by me. Interesting, since I was never alone with any of them during our discussions. Bennett flipped through the documents, frowning. These are quite thorough. Page 12, I continued. You'll find emails from Jeanette dated yesterday morning, expressing fear after being contacted by an associate of Landry's who mentioned her upcoming performance review and her daughter's college tuition. Murmurs rippled through the room. Page 17, text messages from Krista describing a similar approach with references to her mortgage application, currently under review at a bank where Harmon serves on the advisory board. Harmon shifted uncomfortably. I anticipated this. I said clearly, I knew if women came forward, there would be attempts to silence them, so I advised everyone to document any contact from Landry, Harmon, or their representatives. Bennett looked up sharply. Are you suggesting these women were pressured to recant? I'm not suggesting anything, I said, echoing Deborah's words from earlier. I'm presenting patterns, Landry's crisis manager stood abruptly. These are serious accusations without foundation. Our clients have affidavits signed under duress, I interrupted. And we have contemporaneous documentation of that duress. I nodded again to Deborah, who tapped her tablet. The screen behind me lit up with a video. Jeanette sitting in a coffee shop, openly recording on her phone as a man in an expensive suit sat across from her. So just to be clear, Jeanette's voice came through clearly. If I sign this paper saying Sayable Area manipulated me, my performance review next week will reflect exceptional achievement, and the tuition assistance program will suddenly find room in the budget for me. The man's response was measured but damning. Let's just say certain obstacles would disappear with your cooperation. Silence fell over the boardroom. That's Todd Beckman, Harmon said quickly. He doesn't work for me. I've never seen him before. Actually, Deborah replied, according to company payment records, Mr. Beckman received 3 consulting payments from your discretionary budget in the past year. The most recent was Tuesday, the day after the board voted to suspend Landry. The crisis managers exchanged glances. Landry's confident demeanor cracked visibly. This is just one example, I continued. Each of the 4 women who supposedly recanted has similar documentation. They contacted me immediately after being approached. We prepared together. I placed my own folder on the table. But that's not all. Remember the video from Barcelona? I traced questions about what exactly happened that night with Ivy Lambert. Landry palled. Mrs. Lambert initially denied anything happened, then became distressed when the video was mentioned. Mr. Lambert threatened to pull their business. Classic signs of damage control. I paused, making eye contact with each board member in turn. Yesterday, Mrs. Lambert called me directly. Not the investigators, not HR, not legal, me. She found my contact information through a support group for harassment victims that I've been part of since my experience at Vertex. She was referred by another woman, a former client who had a similar experience at a company retreat last year. Harmon's jaw tightened. Mrs. Lambert doesn't remember much about that night in Barcelona. Share members having 2 drinks at the client dinner? She remembers feeling strangely disoriented. Then nothing until she woke up in her room the next morning, confused and physically uncomfortable. Her husband dismissed her concerns, told her she'd simply had too much to drink and embarrassed herself. He insisted they never speak of it again. The room remained utterly still. When the video surfaced, when our investigators contacted her, the fragments started coming back. She's now speaking with authorities in Spain. She's not alone. 3 other women connected to client accounts have come forward with similar experiences at events where both Landry and Harmon were present. Bennett looked directly at Harmon. Is this true? Harmon's face had become a mask. These are outrageous insinuations without the toxicology reports. I cut in. Mrs. Lambert had blood work done after our investigator contacted her. She found traces of a substance consistent with certain drugs known to cause memory loss. This is absurd, Landry finally exploded. You can't possibly believe. What I believe, Bennett interrupted, is that this situation has moved well beyond internal company matters. This board has a fiduciary and ethical responsibility to cooperate with proper authorities. He turned to the company's outside counsel. Contact the police immediately. We will turn over all information we have. You can't do that, Landry stood. Panic replacing his earlier confidence. Actually, we must, Bennett replied coldly. And you should both retain criminal defense counsel immediately, Harmon rose slowly. This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. I believe they do. A woman in a dark suit entered, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Detective Natara Reed. I have warrants for Landry Mitchell and Harmon Wade. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of legal language, Miranda writes, and the surreal sight of Landry and Harmon being escorted from the building in handcuffs. As the boardroom emptied, Deborah approached me. How did the police get involved so quickly? I contacted Detective Reed 3 days ago. I admitted after I received the Barcelona video, I recognized the pattern from cases I'd studied after my experience at Vertex. I didn't know if it would lead anywhere, but I wanted someone in law enforcement to be aware just in case. You've been 3 steps ahead this whole time, Deborah said with newfound respect. I had to be. It was the only way to make sure they couldn't silence the truth again. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks. Landry and Harmon were charged with multiple offenses. Several former clients came forward with similar experiences, expanding the investigation. The company instituted sweeping policy changes with Deborah heading a new ethics committee. My role transformed too. Bennett offered me a position leading a newly created department focused on workplace culture and ethics. We need someone who understands these dynamics from the inside. He said someone who knows how to listen. 1 month after the arrests, I stood before a room of employees conducting the first of many training sessions on recognizing and addressing harassment. The most important thing to understand, I told them, is that harassment thrives in environments where power goes unchecked, where complaints disappear, and where victims are isolated. Our job is to create the opposite kind of environment, one where concerns are heard, where patterns are recognized, and where no one is considered untouchable. Piper, now thriving in her role, approached me after the session. I never thanked you properly, she said, for standing up that day in the break room. You don't need to thank me, I replied. Just do the same for someone else when the time comes. She nodded seriously. I will. That evening, I sat alone in my new office, reflecting on the journey. My revenge hadn't been what people might expect. I hadn't set out to destroy Landry or Harmon personally. I'd focused on systematically dismantling the protection that made them untouchable. The true revenge wasn't in their public humiliation or legal troubles, satisfying as those might be. It was in creating a coalition too powerful to silence. It was in transforming a culture that had protected predators into one that protected victims. It was in knowing that every woman who came after me would enter a workplace where her voice mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Reed. Thought you'd want to know. 3 more victims came forward today. Cases dating back 5 years. Your work made that possible. Is mild. That was the revenge that mattered most. Not destruction, but reconstruction. Not punishment alone, but change that prevented others from suffering the same fate. The most brutal revenge isn't loud or violent. It's when someone realizes that everything they thought protected them has vanished, and everyone now sees them exactly as they're. If you've ever experienced or witnessed harassment in your workplace, know that you're not alone. Stories like this one happen every day, and it takes courage to stand up and speak out. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and justice in the face of adversity. And leave a comment below. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who seemed untouchable? Your experience might give someone else the courage they need to take that first step. Remember, the most powerful weapon against injustice is our collective voice. No one is truly untouchable when we stand together.